The Crusades, myths you believed and the shocking truth. History is written by the victors, or so they say. But when it comes to something as vast and complex as the Crusades, myths and misconceptions seem to reign supreme, clouding our understanding of one of history's most infamous epics. What if the ideas you've held about these holy wars are based on distortions or oversimplifications? Are you sure you know the truth? Buckle up, because today, we're unraveling the shocking realities behind the myths you believed. By the end of this journey, you might just see the Crusades in a whole new light. Historical context. What were the Crusades? To understand the myths, we need to lay the foundation. The Crusades weren't a single event, but rather a series of military campaigns spanning from 1096 to 1291, almost 200 years of bloodshed, betrayal, and fervent ideological warfare. These wars, launched by European Christians, aimed to reclaim the Holy Land, modern-day Israel and Palestine, from Muslim forces. Think of the world at the time. Europe was fractured, the Byzantine Empire was under siege, and Muslim empires controlled much of the Mediterranean and the Middle East. Amid this chaos, Pope Urban II made his dramatic call for the First Crusade, inspiring thousands with promises of spiritual salvation. Pilgrims and knights alike took up arms, driven by religion, or so we've been told. But as we dig deeper, we'll discover that the story of the Crusades was never that simple. The Crusades were purely religious. The Crusades are often painted as holy wars, waged by pure-hearted Christians solely to defend their faith. After all, the rallying cry was Deus vult, God wills it. But was faith the sole motivator? Not by a long shot. Let's uncover the hidden motives. While religion played an important role, other factors were equally, if not more, influential. Consider the political ambitions of European monarchs, eager to expand their influence and cement alliances. Then, there's the promise of material wealth. Knights, peasants, and lords alike saw the Crusades as an opportunity to seize land, loot treasures, and gain titles. One compelling example is the Fourth Crusade. Officially launched to reclaim Jerusalem, it ended with the sacking of Constantinople, an indisputably Christian city. Why? Because the riches of Constantinople were too tempting, far outweighing any spiritual goal. The Crusades weren't just about saving souls, they were about power, profit, and politics under the pretense of piety. Only Christians initiated war? Another widespread myth is that the Crusades were a one-sided offensive, with Christian armies descending on innocent and unsuspecting Muslims. But that's a gross oversimplification. The reality is that the Middle East and Mediterranean had already been theaters of war long before the Crusades even began. Muslim factions were by no means passive victims. These were empires and caliphates, powerful, strategic, and often militarily superior to their European counterparts. They, too, engaged in conquest, raiding Christian strongholds and expanding their territories. The Crusades, in many ways, were a reactionary measure, as much as they were an aggressive campaign. For instance, consider the Battle of Manzikert in 1071, where the Byzantine Empire suffered a devastating defeat against the Seljuk Turks, losing vast swathes of land. This loss spurred calls for help, culminating in the First Crusade. And let's not forget the counterattacks. Muslim commanders like Saladin not only resisted the Crusaders, but also launched campaigns of their own, reclaiming Jerusalem and other territories with strategic brilliance. The Crusades were part of a much larger, two-sided conflict, one filled with ambition and aggression on both fronts. One side was purely good or evil. Perhaps the most pervasive myth is the belief that the Crusades were a battle between good and evil. Depending on your perspective, you might view the Crusaders as valiant warriors of Christendom, or see their Muslim adversaries as righteous defenders of their homeland. But history, as it so often does, proves far messier than our simplistic narratives. Atrocities were committed on both sides. Crusaders massacred entire cities, most infamously during the capture of Jerusalem in 1099, where Muslim, Jewish, and even Christian inhabitants were slaughtered indiscriminately. Meanwhile, military leaders like Saladin, though often mythologized as noble and chivalrous, also used brutal strategies to achieve victory. Consider the siege of Ma'ara, where crusaders resorted to acts of cannibalism out of desperation, or the 1204 sack of Constantinople by crusaders, which saw Christians looting churches, desecrating holy relics, and murdering fellow Christians. The Crusades were neither a righteous crusade nor a heroic defense. They were a bloody, chaotic clash in which morality was often set aside in favor of survival and ambition. The Crusades had no lasting impact. Once the Crusades ended with the fall of Acre in 1291, many assume their significance faded into the sands of time. How could wars fought centuries ago leave a mark on our modern world? Surprisingly, their impact was monumental, and it's still felt today. One of the most enduring legacies of the Crusades was cultural exchange. From the Middle East, European crusaders brought back knowledge in science, medicine, and mathematics, as well as new foods, spices, and architectural styles. The Crusades also played a role in the rise of the Age of Exploration, as Europeans sought alternative routes to the east after the fall of key land trade routes. But not all impacts were positive. The Crusades deepened the divide between Christianity and Islam, animosities that echo in geopolitical conflicts even now. Within Europe, the wars contributed to the centralization of monarchies, as feudal structures weakened with knights and nobles dying far from home. Even today, the term crusade is used rhetorically, often evoking imagery of righteous warfare. Its legacy as both a series of physical conflicts and an enduring cultural narrative remains undeniable. Analyzing the historical significance. The Crusades were far more than knights in shining armor on holy quests. They were a turning point in global history, with ripple effects that shaped not only Europe and the Middle East, but the entire world. Throughout the campaigns, the Crusades also set the stage for unprecedented unity and division. Europe saw the beginnings of national identity emerge as kings consolidated kingdoms. Meanwhile, Muslim factions like the Ayyubid dynasty under Saladin rose to prominence, strengthened by their triumphs over foreign invaders. But perhaps the most interesting part of the Crusades is their mythology. Every retelling reinforces or challenges a particular narrative. To some, the Crusades were a necessary defense. To others, they were a catastrophic offense. Separating history from legend, as we've done here, reveals just how nuanced and perplexing these wars truly were. Conclusion: unveiling the truth behind the myths. What have we learned? The Crusades were not solely religious. They were fueled by politics, ambition, and greed as much as faith. Both sides initiated battles and committed atrocities. Neither Crusaders nor their Muslim adversaries can be painted as wholly good or evil. And rather than vanishing into obscurity, the Crusades left lasting consequences that shaped our modern world. These myths, oversimplifications, and distortions have persisted for centuries, but now you know better. History is rarely black and white, and the Crusades are no exception. The question is, what other accepted truths about history might actually be myths? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Which of these revelations surprised you the most? And what historical myths would you like us to unravel next? Share in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us next time for more deep dives into the shocking truths of history. Because as we've seen today, the past is never as simple as it seems.